Yeah, leave the mic. Yeah. So, so you probably know a bit about the image of Augustus and Julius Caesar, and I said I'd come along today and sort of try and sort of give you sort of a few extra sort of examples you can use, and sort of really think about the image of Augustus and Julius Caesar, because it is the subject of my PhD. So I thought, well, Julio-Claudian image is the subject of my PhD, so I thought I'd break it down sort of into a small chunk for you and just do Caesar and Augustus. If at any point you think, I have no idea what he's talking about, please shout at me, in a polite manner, but you can shout at me, and I'll stop and explain, or you can get Sean to shout at me. Is that all right with everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go. Okay, 30 BC. So you may or may not know that Augustus was once not called Augustus. He was called Gaius Octavianus, or Octavian might be how you refer to him. He is the great nephew of Julius Caesar, and he won a battle called Actium, which is just off the coast of modern day Greece. And he won it against Mark Antony and Cleopatra and the forces of the Egyptian Empire. After this battle, he is the most powerful figure in the Western world, and you may or may not know that he could not be a king because Romans didn't like kings, but he was a supreme ruler. Is anybody in the class aware of the word that the Romans used for him at this point? Just out of interest?
They're looking blank.
Oh, okay. Princeps. Princeps is the word that he used.
They're now all looking as if they know what they're talking about.
Good. Princeps simply means first citizen. So, he would call himself the first citizen, not a king or an emperor or a god. That would come later. But first citizen. Okay, because princeps is quite an inoffensive title. If you wish to be in charge and not have anybody know about it, that's a good one to choose. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is how he turned his position, which is effectively, I've killed everybody that is against me, and I have all the military power, I have a lot of the financial power. How do I not make it look like I'm a dictator? Okay, because dictators are frowned upon in Rome, and so you don't want to be one of those. But how can you still be in charge? That's the key question. And the answer is by creating yourself a new public image, getting yourself a public image which is acceptable to everybody around you. So here we go. I thought I'd put in some scholarship for you all. Can you see that? I assume it's much bigger on your screen than it is on mine.
Yes, easily seen.
So, Goldsworthy, I don't know if you've read Goldsworthy. If you haven't read Adrian Goldsworthy, you should. He's quite good, PhD from Oxford, clever man. And he wrote a biography of Caesar, which is quite good. So I recommend for your reading, should you want to. But for our purposes, what this talks about is Octavian, or Octavius as he's called here, was his uncle's principal heir. So he basically, he gets all the money in the will, and he gets all the power and the honours and the offices in the will. But at the bottom here it says, this need not be instant, but in due course and at a suitable age, it would only be appropriate for him to enter public life and seek fresh distinction for the name of Caesar. He inherited these political expectations as well as a name. Okay, so Goldsworthy says, he didn't just inherit the money and the properties and the titles and the auctoritas or dignitas, so the reputation. Dignitas is reputation. So he inherits all of those things, but he also inherits his name. So Octavian actually changes his name to Caesar. He talks about being Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, because he wants to carry on that idea of Caesar. And it's quite common for Romans to take the names of their family members, as well as adding their own names. In Rome, you have what they call the praenomen, the first name, the nomen, the middle, like what we'd call a middle name, and the trinomen, which is the last name. So, and actually you'd only be referred to by your middle name. So whatever your middle names are, if you were Roman, that would be your name. So, you know, naming conventions have changed across the sort of millennia. And that's how, so Caesar is how you'd refer to Caesar, even though he's got two names before that. Does that make sense? Does that follow?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, cool. Okay, so we've inherited Caesar's name, literally, but also figuratively. You've got to carry on that sort of reputation. You've got to make it happen. And this is what sort of Augustus has to try and balance. So I know that you do in the textbook, I know there's an emphasis on coinage and statues and this sort of thing, as well as literary texts. So I'm going to focus on some coins today, if that's okay, because they're always quite interesting. So coinage was a large part of the formation of the Julio-Claudian image. Whenever I use the word Julio-Claudian, I just mean anybody from Augustus to Nero, because they're all part of the same family, the same dynasty. So that's what I mean when I use Julio-Claudian. But today we're just going to focus on Caesar and Augustus. So Augustus uses the image of Caesar and his own image to test what would be acceptable to the Roman people and what would not. Okay, so how do I want my image on coins to look? And can I get away with them looking how I want them to look rather than how people expect that they will look? Okay, and to do this, he starts with his great uncle. So he starts with the image of Julius Caesar, and we'll see how it changes. Well, you can tell me if you notice the differences. Okay, so coinage is a big thing. The study of numismatics. So how does it work? Okay, so I believe this one is part of your textbook collection, and I believe this is in the Imperial Image textbook. Now, this is one of Octavian's earliest attempts at modelling the image of Caesar. Here on the left, you see a slightly scraggly, old, sort of battered-looking chap, and this is sort of a depiction of Julius Caesar. You even have here in the Latin dictator. Okay, so this is the image of Caesar. You know, he doesn't look great. You know, he looks like he's seen a few rough nights, a few winters. So that's the sort of first efforts, and they're not great. And they change a lot from what comes next. Here, of course, is actually a depiction of Octavian. And he looks a bit better, but he still doesn't look great. You know, he still looks a bit haggard, bearing in mind that by 43 BC, Octavian is 20. I don't know about you, but I think if any of you look like that at 20, you'd want your money back. You wouldn't be particularly pleased. So you see the image and you think, well, what are they doing? Why do they both look so old? Why do they both look so haggard? And the idea is that in the Republic, age was something to be prized, to be privileged. The older you were, the more experience you had, the better you could do your job. So this is something that sort of Octavian is carrying in the image of Caesar that you see on the coin here. Obviously, as his needs change, there's no such thing as the Republic anymore. So we don't need a Republican form of image because it doesn't exist. Yeah, we might pretend it exists, but really Octavian doesn't need it because that's not how he wants to rule. So that's the 43 example. You'll see how it changes and how Caesar actually, before he dies, starts to amend it as well. Okay, now here we go. Augustus sort of did an interesting job on his own image, but also Julius Caesar starts that These are 3 coins which all depict Julius Caesar, and they're all dated to 44 BC. So I want from you, if you can, and I don't know, Sean, you might feed back some of the responses if I can't hear people sort of shouting. But what are your immediate impressions of Caesar in these images?
What would you say? Something about his neck. You can see here the folds in his neck.
Yes, yes. So this kind of I don't know, scraggy, I suppose, is the kind of way you'd depict it. Like it's long. There's like loose folds of skin. Now this is a sort of aging trait, and this is something that you can see on the coin. So the neck is one thing. What else? What else do you notice about Caesar?
He looks what? He looks female, they say.
Oh, okay. Looks. What? Why do you say that?
The woman's name, the middle one.
Maybe quite thin and
yeah. So he does look quite thin. We are sort of limited in what we know about Caesar's physical appearance from the descriptions of the sources, but being that thin is not something that generally comes across. So it is surprising when you see he's got a long, thin neck. He looks quite drawn. He does look quite thin. And the other thing to notice is this. So this is a corona civica, or a civic crown. So you wear this if you save the life of a Roman citizen in battle, and you can wear it wherever you go. It's like a crown of sort of leaves, if you like. It's decorative, but it means you've done something important. It's on all 3 of his coins, but he also uses it for another purpose, which is to hide that he is in fact going bald. So he wears it everywhere he goes because his hair is thinning. So would you regard this man as a powerful man? I suppose is the question I'm asking. Is this a powerful man? What do you think?
they're saying no.
No, yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree. But in the context of the Roman Republic, age and experience is a good thing. So Caesar's depicting himself exactly as the Republic would want him to look. Okay, he's got experience. He's seen a few things. He's done a few things, and this is reflected in what he looks like. Okay, and this is a sort of key thing in the ancient world. What you look like is a symbol of your status and your character. So though he looks old and a bit haggard to us, to a Republican politician, for example, he'd look experienced. He would look to be able to do his job. And obviously this seems odd to us, but you'll see when the change in image comes, you'll think, okay, I can see where the sort of ideas are changing. So this is a 44. So in 44, he's just been made dictator. Okay, but instead of having that image, you have it's a Republican image. He's basically saying nothing to see here, nothing new, no changes. Politically has changed, but the image is the same, and that's the important thing. Show them that nothing's changed, and they will maybe ignore the fact that you're now dictator for life. They didn't, obviously, because a few months after this, they stabbed him to death. But it's his attempt at saying there's no change. It's all as it was. Okay. But here we go. This is an actor. If you've ever seen HBO's Rome, he plays Julius Caesar. He's quite good at it, actually. And here is Suetonius's Life of Caesar, passage 45, 2-3. It says, his boldness gave him much uneasiness, having often found himself on that account exposed to the gibes of his enemies. He therefore used to bring forward his hair from the crown of his head, and of all the honours conferred upon him by the Senate and the people, there was none which he either accepted or used with greater pleasure than the right of wearing constantly the laurel crown. Okay, now if we go back to the image, laurel crown, laurel crown, laurel crown. So Suetonius tells us that he enjoyed wearing it because it made him not look so bold. And on his imagery, you can see the idea that he is wearing the laurel crown, even though he's depicted as old, he's still quite touchy about being bold, and he doesn't want to be seen to be laughed at for being bold. okay? Because in the ancient world, a lack of hair was a lack of manliness. That was the idea. So if you were bald, you were seen as not as manly as the next person, you know, who looked like he'd just come out of a L'Oreal advert. You know, that's the idea. So Caesar wanted to hide that, and he even wanted to hide that on his coinage. So you know, we see some of that coming through. Even though Suetonius was written much later, the contemporary evidence of the coin supports what he is offering us about Caesar and his image. Okay. So here we go. Here's two more coins. Can we do the same thing? So again, what are we thinking? Let me know. These are two different coins, but what are we thinking?
What do you reckon? Is there much difference?
There's no titles, a bit more simple.
Right, there's no title, it looks more simple.
Okay, good. So there's no title. Interesting. That's because this is the obverse of the coin, not the reverse. So either side is important. What do we think about the physical shape of this individual? What's different, if anything?
There's a lot more of him. He seems a little bit fatter now.
No, there is a lot more of him. You're right. You know, look at this neck, for example. We haven't got the scraggy long neck anymore. This is quite a sort of imposing, quite a solid neck. You know, we've got more hair. We've got more hair. Yes, we've got the civic crown, but there's definitely a lot more hair on the head than before. That I think, you know, the face is more filled out as well. Anybody fancy a guess as to why? What's going on? I'll give you a clue. It is Julius Caesar.
Struck, Danny. Mary's asking when the coin was struck.
Who asked? That's a clever question. Who asked that?
Mary.
Well then, Mary. The coin was struck in 37 BC. 37. So the other ones were 44. This one's 37.
He's dead now, she says.
He is indeed. He is very dead now. Yes. So what is that?
Eleanor's no. Okay. Sorry. Carry on.
So what do we think? Okay, coin struck in 37. Caesar's dead now. So why have we got a coin that looks like this? And why have we got a coin with Caesar on it?
He's a god now.
He's not a god yet. He's not a god yet. Not officially. Who struck these coins, do you think?
Does Augustus want to make him look comparatively weaker?
Does Augustus want to make him look comparatively weaker?
No. So interestingly, these were, that is a good question. These were struck by Augustus, and they were struck in 37. But he's not officially a god yet, and certainly not on coinage. But he's a bit more solid, isn't he, Caesar? He looks more solid. He looks more powerful, and this is because we're being introduced to what I believe you can call the Julio-Claudian political body. Okay, and the Julio-Claudian political body looks a certain way and is represented in a certain way. So 44, you've got, if we go, you've got that really scraggy looking old, sort of a bit battered image. Okay, if we come back here, much more powerful looking. Yeah, he doesn't look young, but he looks younger. He's got a much more powerful sort of neck and face. He's got more hair. So he's being depicted as younger. Bear in mind, the Republic doesn't exist anymore. You know, we've sort of got now in 37 a triumvirate. The second triumvirate is sort of dawning on us, and Octavian is part of that. So he starts to strike coins that make Caesar look impressive, but not necessarily completely Republican. When you see some images of Augustus in a minute, you might understand why they look like that. So these are our first goes at Caesar, not by Caesar, as it were. That makes it sound like a perfume, doesn't it? Caesar, not by Caesar. So yes, these are non-Caesar coins which depict Caesar. These are Octavian doing the job. Okay. Now, how did Augustus set about crafting his own image? So he makes Caesar look like this. Caesar looks more powerful. He looks younger. You know, he's got more hair. He's got a more impressive like physique or neck at least. So how does Octavian use that to create his own image? Is he going to go for the old Republican of 44? Is he going to go for the new image that is 37? What do you think? Take a punt. Which one's he going to go for?
What do we reckon? Who thinks 44? Who thinks the earlier image? Later? Yeah. So most are going for the later.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so let's have a look then, shall we? This is from Suetonius's Life of Augustus. What did Augustus really look like? So it says, in old age he could not see very well with his left eye. His teeth were wide apart, small and ill kept. His hair was slightly curly and inclining to golden. His eyebrows met. His ears were of moderate size and his nose projected a little at the top and then bent slightly inward. His complexion was between dark and fair. He was short of stature, 5 feet 9, I won't read the brackets, but was concealed by the fine proportion and symmetry of his figure and was noticeable only in comparison with a taller person standing beside him. So basically, he was short, but they tried to put him next to shorter people, so he looked tall. That's definitely a political thing. The Chancellor, for example, the current Chancellor is only 5'3", but when you see him everywhere, he looks massive because they don't put him next to anybody because it would make him look short. So you go and have a look at pictures of Rishi Sunak if you've got a second and think, how tall do I think he is? I bet you come back somewhere nearer 6 foot, but he's 5'3". So, and they've been doing this for a long time, moving people and making them look taller or better than they really are. So this is what Augustus looked like. So that's what we're told he looks like from the sources. What does he look like in his images then? So here's one. He didn't always quite get this right. This is from a bronze torso of an equestrian statue of the Emperor Augustus. It's currently in the National Museum in Athens. I've said it makes him look a bit thin, maybe slightly ill. What do you reckon? Is this a good look? Would you be happy if somebody brought you a portrait of you that looked like this? What do you think? Are you happy?
Somebody said he looks a bit like a 12-year-old.
Yes, he does look a bit. He's a bit thin, isn't he? He's a bit frail. Anything else? So yeah, he looks like a 12-year-old. What else we got? What else do you think?
Go on, what else do we think? Anything? Mary, did you have something?
No, yeah, he looks really young.
Yeah. Slightly anemic.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think anemic is a good word, but also I think he looks quite sinister. He's got this quite sort of sinister look about him. But he also looks a bit ill. It's an interesting one. There should be a horse on the end of this statue, but we haven't got that anymore. So he would originally be seated on a horse. Is this a good look for the most powerful person on earth? Probably not. You know, if you look at what the coins of Caesar, he doesn't look as good as Caesar in the second image. So it's a trial and error type thing. You know, it doesn't look good. But he keeps on trying. There are other examples. He keeps on sort of having a think about it. Here we go. Here's another one. What was that?
What do we reckon of this one?
He looks slightly older than 12.
He looks older than 12.
Yeah, he's aging. He's aging. Yeah.
Looks like the boy out the Polar Express, apparently.
Right. Okay.
They're all now starting to comment on what a small head he's got.
A small head. Yeah. So I mean, the neck's quite imposing compared to the head, isn't it? He has got quite a small, but you know, think about. I don't know. You might not know somebody with a small head. Let's say you do know somebody with a small head. Do you think they're going to be a physically imposing person?
No.
No. You don't often see like 6'4" massive people, but with really small heads. That's not really a thing, is it? it doesn't go along with the image. So Zanker, who's a very famous Roman historian, German, excellent historian, he talks about this one being hungry and aggressive. That he looks quite lean, he looks quite aggressive. You know, he doesn't look 12 anymore. Now, this is dated to about 30 BC. So we talked about Actium at the beginning being about 30 BC. So this comes out just as Octavian's destroyed all of his political enemies. So Zanker, in that context, is saying this is Octavian being sort of aggressive and desiring power and getting it by destroying everyone who was against him. Now, you might agree with that or you might not. That's completely up to you. But you can see how this is definitely different to the equestrian statue, but it's also very different to either of the Caesar depictions. So what do you think is happening in these images that we're seeing? What's Augustus doing?
What do you reckon?
Kind of evolving to what kind of opinions around him are making it work for him.
Right, so he's evolving to an opinion of people around him and making it work for him. His face, I've noticed, always tends to look directly at us.
Yes, yes. There is a thing in sort of Julio-Claudian portraiture, what they call the melting gaze. The melting gaze was something which Alexander perfected, which is sort of looking at you, but almost also not looking at you at the same time. So, and Alexander's portraiture has got a lot of this going on, and Octavian uses some of that. And it's sort of the eyes follow you, but it's almost like he's not making direct eye contact with you. As you see, his gaze is slightly raised, and that's a very interesting thing about ruler portraiture. A lot of them have that expression in the eyes where they're looking at you, but almost slightly above you, as if to not make direct contact with you visually. Now, somebody said he's making it work for him. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. You know, if you do anything, can you be expected to get it right the first time? You know, I would probably say no. But how do you make sure you end up getting it right? You practice. So this is Octavian, effectively, practicing his public image. Remember, he's quite a young man. He's only 33 at this point. It's quite a young, and I know you're all 17. You're thinking young. What are you talking about? It's double my age. But comparatively speaking, that's quite a young man to hold power like that. So he's thinking, I've got a bit of time to play around with my image, and this is him playing around with it. You know, I'm not so thin as I was in the other statue. I tend to be looking at the audience more directly here. You know, I've sort of got a more sort of imposing sort of neck again, more like Caesar, but not quite like Caesar. So I'm seeing what works for me, and I'm seeing what doesn't work for me. And I think, you know, that's important if you think about sort of the image of Augustus. It's very much a trial and error thing. Never think that Augustus has it sorted straight away, because these examples prove that he doesn't. I mean, if you feel it would be helpful, all of you lot, and Sean, if you feel it would also be helpful, I'm happy to send you the museum references for these statues if you'd like to use them in an essay or anything like that.
That'd be helpful, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Because it is a trial and error. It's not a perfect fit. And so to never think that it was a perfect fit to begin with, because the evidence suggests that he tried very hard to make it work for him. Okay, here we go. He got there in the end. Okay, so here, this is Augustus, Octavian. This is him. From about 30 BC, so just after the last image. This is what they call the prima porta type. It's on the slide. This is a type of statue. Sean, are they aware of the prima porta itself?
Yes, we've covered prima porta.
Yes, great. So you all know what the prima porta is. There is a prima porta type. This is the prima porta type. They all mirror that same facial structure. of the prima porta. There are slight variations, but they're all very similar. And this type is so good that other people copy it. So right is Gaius and left is Lucius. They're his grandsons and his adopted sons. Eventually he adopts them. Once he adopts them, they look like this. This is their image. So Augustus keeps it for the remaining 46 years that he is alive. He manufactures this image. All of his portraits they look like this, the prima porta style. But it's so effective that his, potential sort of successors, you may or may not know that they never get there. Both of them die when they're about, well, one's 18 and one's 20. So they never make it. But that's not the point. The point is, look at their public image. It's very Julio-Claudian. The hair, the nose, the eyes, it's all very similar, or in fact almost identical, because he's found what works for him. I don't know who said whatever works for him, but whoever said that, you were spot on. Excuse me. He found what worked for him, and he kept reproducing it. We haven't got, the idea that sort of he looks a bit, here he doesn't look great, it's a bit, here he looks even worse. All of a sudden, we've done those and we're back to this. Now this looks a lot more impressive. He looks a lot younger, and that doesn't change. He's about 30 odd there. Even when he's 70, the image is still 30. The image does not change. The image remains eternally youthful. Okay, and that's the ploy. That's the idea. And even though his grandsons are young, the model is so good, they keep it because it works. Okay. So this is something that he adopts and he keeps, and he makes sure that that everybody can reproduce. So what do you reckon? Do you like this image? Do you think it was a good image for him to pick? What do we think? Is this better than the other two?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a very firm, definite yes there. Yeah, it is a more effective image, and the fact is he picks it, and because he thinks, right, that works for me, he keeps it because he wants to be seen as forever youthful. Now, I suppose, I know we're sort of verging on politics here, but why would you want to look forever young? Why would you want your image to be forever young if you're the person in charge? What do you think?
Any ideas? Why would you always want to be seen as forever young? Yep.
You kind of represent the state you have power over. So by looking older and weaker, you kind of makes people think, oh, is the state getting older?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Nice. It's nice. It's interesting. Okay. Yeah, good. Okay. Now, if we think about it, how was the Republic governed before the death of Caesar? I don't know how much you know about Republican politics, so I'm happy to fill in the gap if necessary, Sean.
Yes, please.
Okay, so before Julius Caesar became dictator, every year there were 2 consuls. Now, consuls, think of it like our prime minister, but for 6 months it's one person, and then for 6 months it's another. Okay, they elected 2 every year. After that, after you'd had your year as consul, okay, you then couldn't be consul again for 10 years. So it didn't matter how old you were, because you'd only be in the job for a year. And what did we say earlier about why did Julius Caesar want to look as he did in his first coins? What did they value, the Romans?
Sorry? Age and experience.
Age and experience, yes. So because you had a consul and the consul left after a year, their images all look old because they valued the experience. They wanted the people running the state to know what they were doing. When the Republic is removed and Augustus is the only one in charge, age and experience are not a problem because you won't rotate. He's not going to leave after a year. he's going to be there for as long as he has power, and that makes it different. He's got to be young because he's the head of the state. Imagine if you depicted him as looking old and haggard, and you think, oh my God, but he's the one in charge. What happens when he dies? What do we do? Because obviously before he was in charge, all you had was war between Caesar and Pompey, war between Octavian, Cleopatra, and Antony. So if he leaves, if he dies, what do we go back to? Do we go back to that? Well, nobody wants to go back to that. So as long as he looks youthful, it doesn't really make a difference whether he is or not. Who is familiar with the Wizard of Oz phenomenon? Anyone? Hands. Wizard of Oz. Do we know it?
No,
Nobody's seen the Wizard of Oz.
not even me, I'm afraid, Danny.
Have you not? Oh my goodness. Oh, right. I'm leaving. I'm going. End of talk. No.
What's their homework?
So in the Wizard of Oz, there is a wizard, all-powerful wizard, and the main characters meet him, and they think he's this massive, powerful figure, and like he's got all the pyrotechnics and the booming voice and all this. And actually, behind the curtain is just a little man pulling the levers on a machine to make this very scary, very powerful thing. And when they discover it, he says, "Oh, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Ignore that. It's actually this big, powerful, scary thing." Now, that is the same as Augustus. Don't worry about what he actually looks like. Don't worry about how old he actually is. Just keep looking at the statues. If you look at the statues, he's always 30. If you want to know who's going to run the state, it'll be Augustus, because he never ages. Just keep looking at them. They're all the same. So there's that idea that as long as you don't question it, you don't have to worry about who will run the state. It will be Augustus, because his image doesn't age. Look at his grandsons. They have the same image. What does that, the fact that his grandsons have the same image, what does that tell us about who's going to run the state after he's gone?
He is.
He is. They are. He is.
Yep.
It's the same thing. There's nothing to see here. There is no change. It's business as usual. That's why he created an image which could be transferred. What you're looking at, in my opinion, and we'll see if the PhD panel agree with me, but what we're looking at is the Julio-Claudian political body. This is how they fashion their image, and it's so good that you can just pass it down the line. And in fact, if you look at other Julio-Claudians, there are some tweaks, but they pass it down the line. Doesn't change. It looks the same. And the reason is because if you want to know who's going to run the state, the answer is we are. And there is nothing that's going to change about the image. This is why he spent such a long time getting it right, because once he had it, it was copyable, reproducible, reprintable. And there are differences from provincial stuff. So something from Gaul might not be as good quality as something from Rome. And you see that. You see it's similar, but it's not the same because the quality of workmanship is not as good. But the model is the same. And that's because evidence suggests that they had a model created, which they sent to people and said, do this, do what you can with this. So they tried very, very hard to make this model work. Okay.